And now the time has come to welcome our keynote speaker for this morning's conference. Glenn Hammer is president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He hardly needs any introduction in Arizona, but I will tell you that he brings a unique wealth of talent and experience to his position. Glenn understands government very, very well. He has played leadership roles in the solar energy industry. And in his role as president and CEO of the Chamber, Glenn has built broad coalitions for effectiveness, and he's been recognized for that locally and nationally. I will also tell you that speaking with Glenn, it's impossible, number one, not to feel more informed, and it's impossible not to like him. And I think that's one of the secrets of his success. So in this time when we are seeking our path to economic recovery and economic leadership for Arizona, there's no one who I'd rather hear from than Glenn Hammer. Please join me in welcoming Glenn, our distinguished keynote speaker, to the stage.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman, for that very kind introduction. And I apologize on my end for some technical difficulties. My AV team during the pandemic is outstanding. It's my wife and my young 11-year-old daughter. So I believe we're all set. And I'd like to thank everyone at the Economic Policy Institute for the invitation to participate in this esteemed event. Like all the participants, I wish we were able to gather in person. And Flagstaff is one of my very, very favorite places, not just in the country and in the state, but in the world to be. And that's really where I want to start, because the fact that we can't get together in person is because we're still in a global pandemic that has upended the economy, the political landscape, and of course our daily lives. So I'm going to start with the global pandemic. So let's talk about first where we all were before this started. If you're anything like me, it's really hard to remember where we were before March. Well, I know basically where I was. I was at a spring training game somewhere in the greater Phoenix area. We're almost mid-pitch. The world stopped. And I'd like to first start by taking a look at the chart that illustrates the decade of pre-pandemic growth that the U.S. Was experiencing. And then we'll take a look at where we are in 2020 on the far right. We fall off a cliff. So if we could please have the first slide up there, I'd appreciate it. Great. I mean, you could see that this picture is just really simply unreal. And even if you think in terms of unemployment claims, in a normal week when our economy is doing very well, maybe we have 3,000 claims statewide. The first week that we really were hit by the pandemic, we saw a 50-fold increase to 150,000. We've never seen anything like this really in our country's history in terms of the severity. I sometimes say this was like Katrina times 1,000, but it wasn't just one state or one local area. It was all 50 states and really even the entire world. So it's important to take a look at this chart of the hard hit industries, and you'll see where Arizona is particularly exposed. Certainly no sector of the economy is immune, but tourism and hospitality have just been walloped. And these are the areas where we're still having the greatest difficulty. You know, the pandemic hitting in March, again, meant spring training stadiums, which were enjoying a record year, were quickly emptied out. Hotel occupancy rates hit the single digits. Conventions, business travel just canceled overnight. And restaurant receipts cratered. The pain has been felt statewide. You know, I know in northern Arizona, you felt the disruption in the tourism sector. It's affected destinations like the Grand Canyon. Our international travel that was enjoying record years came to a grinding halt given the travel restrictions. Although I know you're still hoping we could have a profitable skiing and winter recreation season, and And I'll just say the Hammer household will do its part, because I promised my girls that we will go up north once the snow really starts coming down. There is reason for optimism, however. As I said, Arizona had one of the country's hottest economies pre-pandemic. And I believe with the right policy moves and smart public policy protocols, we'll get back to that point. And there's good news on the horizon. Pfizer just announced very promising evidence that from a stage 3 clinical trial that their vaccine may be up to 90% or more effective. And there's other vaccines in the pipeline. And I would expect by the end of the year, we'll start seeing people, first responders, hospital workers, people who are really on the front lines start to be able to get these vaccines. What's also important, I'd like to, I believe this may be, if we could please go to the next chart. Okay, so what I was saying is that not all sectors of the economy have been hit in the same way. So at the peak of the pandemic, we probably in Arizona lost north of 350,000 jobs at least. And I think if you counted all the people on traditional federal unemployment insurance and the expanded pandemic unemployment insurance, probably at the peak, we had about 1 million people. I mean, just shattering all the records that we've ever had. Now, there are certain industries that were not hit nearly as hard. And part of the reason was that one of the things we worked very hard on at the chamber was to make sure that as we, like other states, were figuring out what to keep open and what to close, is that we had the lightest touch possible to ensure the safety of our citizens and to try to get the pandemic under control, but to do the least amount of the least amount of damage to our economy. So Arizona never closed our manufacturing sector. We never closed our construction sector. E-commerce boomed. A lot of our retail establishments were kept open. So we did smart things like takeout for restaurants so that we could keep as much oxygen in those establishments during the first wave of the pandemic. And even for outdoor activities, we were I think Governor Ducey was ahead of the curve on things like golf, which my birth state, New York, eventually, even when cases were really going up, opened up. The reason being outdoor activities are far safer than indoor activities. If we could please go to the next slide. So you'll see, and this is a slide that I really like, is that, yes, the whole U.S. economy had been in about a 10-year growth cycle, with the last few years really being very, very good, where the country as a whole was experiencing record low unemployment rates, record employment rates, and it was something that was being felt by all sectors of the economy and all of our people. It was really something. Arizona was doing even better than that. In addition to being one of the fastest growing states, we were one of the fastest growing states in terms of job growth. And one of the things that's important for us as a chamber is, as a statewide chamber, is that this growth is something that we see experienced by all of our 15 counties. And I believe she may be participating or on the program, but I want to particularly call out the great work of my colleague Julie Pastrick, who does a great job of running the show economic-wise, chamber-wise, in Flagstaff and the greater Flagstaff area. She's a great role model, and she has been a major reason why Northern Arizona always has a seat at the table. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the state and federal response to COVID. And there's a lot of good things here. And then maybe we'll have some questions and I'll have some general comments about what just happened in the elections. But the response to COVID-19 on the state and federal level certainly initially was very strong, very powerful, very successful, and extraordinarily bipartisan, which is what the state and country needed. And in fact, Arizona acted first with the leadership of the state legislature, both parties, and the governor. We passed a COVID-19 response program that has at least $55 million worth of funds that have been distributed or are being distributed to the hardest hit areas in terms of our population and areas of our economy. And some of this has seeped into our small businesses. The federal response was very effective, and particularly in the early days. When you take a look on the business side, the CARES Act, which for the business community, I'd say the most important parts of that were the Paycheck Protection Program and the Small Business Emergency Disaster Loans. The Paycheck Protection Program by itself has brought in over $8.5 billion to Arizona's economy. That's about that's somewhere around 2.5% or so of our GDP. And then if you add in the enhanced unemployment insurance, that was also part of the first wave of packages, that's about another 2.5% of Arizona's GDP. So those two things by themselves were enormously valuable. There was of course also stimulus payments to individuals and to families to help them weather the first part of the pandemic. There was additional resources for universities, for K through 12 education system, for infrastructure, certainly for our hospitals that desperately needed additional funds, because let's remember, early on, all the elective surgeries or most elective surgeries were shut down statewide. So our hospital and healthcare system was badly hit. So the CARES Act and all the different federal responses, including important things, funds for testing, funds for contact tracing, all in, we're probably at about $3 trillion that's at least been allocated. Not all the dollars have gone out, but they're still in the process of being distributed by different states through different levels of government. So I mentioned the importance of, particularly in the early days, the $600 top up on the federal side for unemployment insurance, the direct payments to families and to individuals, as well as the PPP. But here's the interesting thing. So as I said, we lost about 300,000, at least 300,000 or so jobs at the beginning of the pandemic. We're probably down to still minus about 125,000 jobs. And one of the things I should have said, that the original CARES Act also did provide considerable funding to our state and local governments. And that was very important because particularly at the early part of the pandemic, the tax receipts for things like restaurants, hotels, et cetera, just fell off a cliff. But let's go to the next. Okay, let's see. Arizona, if we could go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, this is really interesting, and it's very positive. U.S. job growth year to date, if you look at Arizona during the pandemic, we're doing very, very well compared to other states. Yes, we're still down, but we're one of the top states in the country. And again, I believe that's because we've had a good balance, in our view, between protecting public safety and public health, which is always number one. We can never allow our excellent hospital system to be overrun, but we do have to balance out living with the virus as safely as we can. And again, I think you take a look at these numbers. We've been able to do a good job of balancing things out. Now, we also believe at the Chamber that we all, as a business community, have a role to play. We, in terms of making sure that if we're going to have the economy open, which we want, that we do so safely. and if we could please go to the next slide. So good health is good business. One of my chamber colleagues has used the line, sometimes some of this could get a little bit politicized, and I'm speaking particularly when it comes to masks. One of my chamber colleagues said, the way we look at it is wearing a mask is a small price to pay to keep as much of the economy open as possible. And so what we've done, and Courtney Coolidge from our office has done a great job of putting this program together, partnering with with Arizona's Medical Association. We've set up a program, Be Safe, Be Open, AZ campaign. And within this, we are able to share materials with Arizona employers at simple things that they can do and to promote to keep people safe. And it's the obvious things. So physically distance, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, avoid large crowds, and of course, the big one, wear a mask. Now, we still think, so post-election, we still think that more relief needs to be done. Number one in our list is there needs to be liability protections for those temporary and targeted to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is something that's not just important to businesses of all sizes and all sorts, but this is very important for our K through 12 system, for our university system, for our nonprofits, for our state and local governments. And the reason why there have been lawsuits filed across the country that could cost any of those entities quite a bit of resources, even if they've taken the best possible health protocols. And that's just not right. We feel very strongly that if you're playing by the rules and doing the best you can, you shouldn't have another risk factor being getting sued. And this, of course, also goes for our healthcare system. I mean, it's very, very important when they're doing everything they possibly can to keep us safe. We don't want them to have another burden. And our hope is that in a lame duck session of Congress or early next year at the very latest, liability protection will be something that will be done on the federal level. Now, we're also going to work hard to try to get something done on the state level as well. I would also say on the federal level, we do have some other asks. We do believe that there needs to be more K through 12 dollars, particularly when it comes to the expenses to keep schools open. It's not cheap for schools that have in classroom learning, which so many do right now. We also believe that we're going to need to have another round of paycheck protection loans for those industries that have been hardest hit. So we're talking the hospitality sector, the restaurant sector. They're going to still need another bridge. Many of these businesses, not all, but many of these businesses, until we get a good vaccine and we achieve some level of herd immunity. We've also been strong supporters of the assistance for our airline industry. That industry has just been hit the hardest. You can't really travel many places internationally and even domestically. It's been greatly depressed. But again, good news that I do believe by the time spring training rolls around in March, things will be really considerably moving in the right direction as vaccines, better therapeutics come online. I'd like to now really dig into a little bit education in the age of COVID, and I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm just going to put this information out there because there was certainly a lot of debate on Proposition 208, and I just want to explain why the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry took a firm position against it, and where I believe we could productively go from here. But what I'd like to first do is just set a little bit of the framework of what we've been doing in the space of education over the last decade or so. And this question of state and federal responses to education during the time of COVID really is critically important. Education for states is like national defense for the federal government. It's the number one thing. It's essential, and it's a core state government responsibility. And it deserves our lawmakers' utmost attention each legislative session. The business community, of which we're certainly a member of, often gets accused of not doing enough for education, or that it doesn't care. And I'll also just say, I'm the product of two public school teachers from the state of New York. So when it comes to education, had probably hundreds, if not thousands, of dinner time conversations about not just the importance of K through 12 education, but things that we could do productively to get results. And my dad at one point was the youngest high school principal in New York, and my mom's better career as a special education teacher in the New York state system. Speaking, this is Northern Arizona Flagstaff. In 2019, a group of Flagstaff area educators wrote a letter into the Daily Sun, which called into question our support for education funding. And I just wanted to share our response, because I think it's just as relevant today as it was when it was printed a year or so ago. The Arizona Chamber supported the original passage of Proposition 301, which established a 0.6% sales tax for education. We then supported the 20-year extension of the sales tax, which the legislature passed and the governor signed in 2018. And that's important because that's not just for K through 12, that's for our community colleges and our universities as well. During the depths of the recession, the financial panic recession, when all parts of state government were being slashed and we lost about 35% of our state revenue almost overnight, we supported, and we're the lead funder, I believe, the passage of Proposition 100 to establish a temporary 1-cent sales tax for 3 years to prevent deep cuts to education. That raised about $3 billion over the course of that tax. We were the business community's leading advocate, or one of them at least, for the successful adoption, by voters of Prop 123, which will result in about $3.5 billion going into K through 12 over the course of a decade by increasing the disbursement from the state land trust to schools. And we strongly supported the 2018 budget package that included a 20% average statewide pay raise for K through 12 teachers by school year 2020. And we support the continued restoration of district additional assistance, which schools can use for a range of reasons, including to increase teacher pay. And we also support continued inflation adjustments for teacher salaries as well. These two investments alone have totaled $1 billion in new and restored K through 12 funding on an annual basis. And the chamber was also very vocal, along with every chamber, basically, to be an advocate for career and technical education, to help equip more high school graduates with the skills to succeed in high demand fields. We championed the restoration of CTE funding when it was cut, and we supported establishing a grant program for community colleges engaged in training students in high wage, in-demand fields like manufacturing, technology, and financial services. We supported the university's $1 billion bonding package as well, and we've always supported additional funding for our community colleges. We've also supported things like results-based funding with a special emphasis on low-income schools. What results-based funding is it's basically helps accelerate the classroom slots for high-performing schools. We think that's important. Results should matter. But here's the thing: investments of this size are only possible thanks to a thriving economy. We were able to do all this and still squirrel away about $1 billion for a rainy day, and that hit us with the pandemic. You can't deliver 20% pay raises when the economy and the state general fund's shrinking, nor can you count on $500 million or so from the Prop 301 sales tax. So this brings us to the recent passage of 208. As I said, most in the business community opposed the measure and pretty strongly. And the reason why it takes the state's top tax rate, individual tax rate, which many businesses pay through, from a very competitive 4.5% to 8%. That's the 9th highest rate in the country. It's also a lot higher than our corporate tax rate, which will remain at 4.9%. So there is a fairness issue there. So I'm not going to relitigate the entire campaign here. You've all seen too many campaign ads, myself including. But this is what we know. States with high tax rates typically struggle economically. It's not theoretical for me. I lived this in New York. If you told me at this point in my life, Florida, as a kid growing up in New York, that Florida would have more people than New York, and it does, and considerably more, I would say that you were drinking too much concentrated orange juice. So these things matter, and having the right balance is important. And our competitiveness is important because our neighbor right next to us, Colorado, actually just reduced by a vote of the people, 57%, reduced their top income tax rate for pass-throughs, individuals, and corporations to 4.55%. And New Mexico is about 4.8, 4.9%. Utah is about the same, and Nevada has 0% income tax. California is much higher, 13% plus at their top rate. But we compete for these California jobs. So we're going to have to think through what we're going to do in terms of tax reform so that we remain competitive. And we'll think creatively. The bottom line is we live in a great state. We just had an election. We'll figure this out. And I think, when you take a look at, if you were going to say 30,000 feet, what did the election bring us? I mean, it was very interesting. Here in Arizona, the legislature, against all the odds, will remain in Republican hands. Proposition 208 very narrowly passed. We have a new, we're going to have 2 Democratic senators with the election of Senator-elect Kelly. We have President-elect Biden, but in the Senate overall, will probably remain narrowly in Republican hands. The U.S. House of Representatives has a closer margin. It's going to be about an 8 or 9 seat margin, one of the tightest in our nation's history. So there's why I'm optimistic is I think there's a lot of room for governing. So when we look about the challenges ahead in 2021 for the governor and the new legislature, we still have work to do on COVID response. And I want to thank NAU has been just terrific in a lot of the work it has done in this area in healthcare and all of the different important aspects related to COVID. Immigration, I think, is going to be a great opportunity. Again, not theoretical for me. I'm married to an Israeli. The country won one with her and her family coming over here. There's things we could do with Dreamers. There's things we could do to make it easier for students to, again, study. You've got a great international program at NAU. The other universities do as well. We want to make it easier for these individuals to come on visas, and we want to make it easier for them to stay here. Let's staple a green card for those that are graduating from these high demand areas. There's a ton we could do in environmental work. I used to run the National Solar Energy Industries Association. Arizona is a very proud record there. The voters, very wisely, in my opinion, made some good choices. Our good friend, former chamber head from the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, Leah Marquez Peterson, just was elected to a full term. She's going to do a great job. So there's a lot we could do in the clean economy. We have Lucid, we have Nikolai, we have First Solar. We are I think we're number 1 or 2 per capita in solar. So much more to do, a lot to do in healthcare. And, so my final points are let's work together civilly. Let's try to find a common ground to advance the state, whether it's our economic competitiveness, our health competitiveness, our clean energy competitiveness, you name it. There's a lot of areas we could find for agreement. And I just, again, want to thank Dr. Guzman and NAU for this opportunity. And just thank you for being one of the cornerstones of Arizona's education system, as well as our economic development system as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Fantastic. Thank you for the super insights and a very positive vision for the future. I want to just ask one question with the time remaining.
Sure.
So we've all seen that small businesses have probably been the most put upon by the shutdown and all the circumstances surrounding our economy. So what do you think we could do to support the return of small businesses, but also to maybe accelerate it so that we have the right ecology and balance of businesses, small and large, to help us move forward?
Great question. On the federal level, to me, it's another round of paycheck protection program in these industries that have been hard hit, like tourism. On the state level, I believe the governor just opened up a program to help fund our local chambers that then can help their communities figure out what's best for them to recover and get to the other side of this pandemic. So I would say on the state level, let's make sure we have strong local chambers and have them make sure that they have a seat at the table as resources are developed. And on the federal level, let's fight for another round of targeted paycheck protection program. And then I think also we're going to have to, at the legislature, figure out what we need to do tax-wise to make sure that the small businesses that could be hit very hard by the tax surcharge are treated fairly. No small business in this state. I'm going to say this. We're going to fight unapologetically for this. No small business in this state should be paying more taxes than a multinational. Period. So we're going to fight to make sure that we've got tax equity, and I look forward to, in the very near future, being at NAU and frequenting your outstanding small businesses.
We look forward to having you. So Glenn, I think we are almost. Jump in the camera and thank you, and also thank all of our other presenters and panelists. I want to thank the President's event staff, Shannon Schutz and Krista Allen, and also the very professional team at Scarrett Group, all of our staff and students, our sponsors, Alliance Bank and Alliance Group, and Scarrett Group. And also I want to thank all of you who signed in and participated. Thanks for joining. We are here for you, and we look forward to our continued engagement. So have a great lunchtime and a great rest of your day.